Welcome to your doom.
Altered Beast. It was only a matter of time before I covered this game. Not exactly loved by all, but when looking at the history of gaming by my favourite company SEGA, or as console gaming as a whole, especially during the 16-bit era, for better or worse, this game is one of the most important games of that generation. And this channel just wouldn't be worth its weight in gaming historian gold if I didn't look at exactly why that is. You want to play cutesy platformers involving princesses and miserable mushrooms? Then go over here. But if you want to go up against your parents' best wishes, playing as the reincarnated corpses of a couple of dead warriors, building up your muscles before turning into wolves, bears or dragons whilst fighting off decapitated demon heads, then this is what you want. Although, if I'm going to be honest, yeah, it's probably best you just stick with Mario, guys. But if, like me, you didn't notice what was best for you in the first place, then until that time I invite you to join me as we take a look at the complete history of Altered Beast, where we'll be looking at its creator, its rather shocking ports and sequel, the initial plan of what was going to be, and of course, the games themselves. Welcome to Slope's Game Room. For me, I got my Mega Drive not only after Altered Beast was a pack-in game, but instead when Sonic 1 was a pack-in alongside Sonic 2. In fact, my first experience with Altered Beast was actually via this. Altered Beast for the Amstrad CPC. And as I typed this script out, I realised that this is probably the same for the majority of UK listeners. You see, even though we did well with the Mega Drive here in the UK, selling approximately 30 to 40,000 units in its early months, we as a nation were still very much a home computer country through and through. And considering this game got ported more times than FIFA fans get tricked into paying full price for DLC, just like me, there's a good chance you played a port before you played the original. Heck, if we're going to get technical, even that Mega Drive / Genesis game was also a port. Which means, yep, I think we're in fact getting a little ahead of ourselves, guys. So, let's go back to the beginning. Let's start off by chatting about this guy. Once again, Makoto Ushida. I say once again because we have now covered this guy several times on the Complete History show. I'm talking Golden Axe, Nights into Dreams, Space Channel 5, Crazy Taxi. I mean, sure, he wasn't as involved with certain games in this list than others, but he did indeed provide a helping hand with all of these games, among many, many more. Ushida-san has Sega pumping through his blood, and he still works with the company to this day as the current head of Sega's Shanghai R&D division. But his role at Sega actually started all the way back in 1987. He had always been a big fan of gaming, being completely absorbed by it in fact, and even though he grew up in a neighbourhood with little to no arcade life in it, that didn't stop him biking up a mountain for an hour and a half each way to watch other people play on these arcade machines when he had no money to his name at a local ski resort. In a word, this guy was gaming obsessed. Eventually the day did come that he actually got into playing games himself, as he played classic arcade games such as Pac-Man, pretty much to perfection. Ushida-san took this whole thing very, very seriously, and in an interview with Sega Legacy he explains just how seriously he took it.
Before playing, I went to the bathroom and I made sure to have something to drink before starting my game. Once started, I could play for half an hour without making a single mistake.
Fair play. Regardless, when that time did arrive and Ushida-san found himself in the role of a playtester for Yu Suzuki's awesome Afterburner game, he obviously made a good enough impression at this point, as not long after he found himself pitching a somewhat standard beat-em-up game with a bit of a unique twist. In most games, as you make your way through, you lose health and you become weaker and weaker as the game progresses. However, he wanted to turn the whole idea on its head. He wanted you to control a muscular man from the get-go that gets more and more powerful depending on the pickups you gather throughout the game, and Sega's head liked the idea, but sadly, no teams were available to make it, and therefore, Yoshida-san went back to playtesting and of course continuing to develop his idea. The whole make the main muscular character stronger mechanic was the real driving force with this game, but the big issue for him, however, was, basically, just when to stop. He was trying to come up with a way of showing off what that final form would be, and after watching a couple of spooky flicks on TV, it all started to fall into place. What if that final form was not yet another muscle expanding animation, but instead a transformation of a kind of animal monster character, aka a ferianthrope? Yes, that's apparently how you say that. And for those like me that just don't understand this meaning, is a term used to refer to a transformation of a human being into an animal partially or completely. Yep, just as Arnold Schwarzenegger's Conan influenced his future game Golden Axe, this game's influence actually came from such flicks as The Howling and Michael Jackson's excellent Thriller music video. As time went on, the idea for his game continued to grow with a Greek setting, infested with monstrous enemies, and before you know it, 6 months had passed before a team was finally ready and the concept of Altered Beast had been thoroughly thought through. The eventual lead programmer who'd worked on Alex Kidd and the Lost Stars headed up Team Shinobi, who had just finished, you guessed it, Shinobi, and the crew got to work turning this incredibly unique for the time game idea into an arcade game using the Sega System 16 arcade hardware as the basis, simply because of its ability to show off incredibly big sprites. From the get-go, it was that transformation idea that was the first to get nailed, which is why he ended up getting his lead artist to work on nothing but that for an entire month. It's obvious that this game was designed from a design point of view more than anything, as not only were those transformations made to grab arcade goers' attention, but so were the enemies that you actually fight in the game.
I chose beasts that would best match the environment that could reign as the most powerful existence in that world.
Obviously, with such a long time for game conception, well, for the late 80s at least, a crazy amount of ideas were implemented into the design of the game, some of which were yet again inspired by movies he saw, especially classic Harryhausen movies, and it's fair to say in retrospect that perhaps a few too many ideas were actually implemented into this game, because although the end result is a rather simple and a good amount of fun in the arcades, it lacked a whole lot of depth. Originally, each character and transformation would not only have a drastically different ability, but also different strengths too. Being that the game was all about punching and kicking your way through the game, it also was originally going to have pressure-sensitive buttons included. The harder or softer you hit, the harder or softer the attack would be. However, this obviously just didn't happen. The end result, as stated, is a fine game in the arcades at least, but with so many other similar games on the market, including Sega's own produced ones, which, let's be honest, were actually better, it sadly didn't hit it off too well in its homeland in the long run. But where some will argue that this game may fall down in gameplay and depth, it sure as hell made all of that up in its design and its style.
The best thing about making the game was that I could show my idea to everyone and surprise them. I was so thrilled when I saw not only the players, but the people around the players uniformly surprised at the video arcade.
Who knows how this game would have ended up if all those ideas were implemented? It's yet again another classic case of what if? What if this game was more than just a simple brawler with a gorgeous art style? What if this game did have more than just 5 stages? And what if this game did actually implement pressure-sensitive buttons, which if you ask me actually sounds awful? I suppose we will just never know.
Because of the lack of a pressure-sensitive sensor button, the number of character actions fell to half from the original concept, and the complexity of the game was decreased by this. As a result, players got tired of the game relatively soon.
Yeah, it's quite interesting to look at what could have been, but in all honesty, in my opinion, if the game did include these stripped out features, it would in fact possibly lose its biggest selling point, which is, of course, its charm. Sure, the game is repetitive, nobody's knocking it for that, most games in this genre were like that. But for me, when you get used to the game, and to be fair, give it some much needed trial and error, you do eventually learn the best way to play it. Its gameplay isn't groundbreaking, and even for its time it felt a little clunky and non-forgiving, but when you get used to it, you're gonna have a lot of fun. What this game has going for it in spades is its look and feel. Add this into a pretty cool transformation mechanic with each of these 5 stages looking completely unique, and you got a game that, no matter how hard or, to be honest, frustrating it may be in the first place, if you stick with it you will be left with a very memorable experience. When you beat up the enemies, their limbs fly towards the screen. You can beat the crap out of tombstones when you hear these timeless digitized voices start you off.
Rise from your grave.
And come up again when you fight your enemies. When you get pulled in by the stunning attract mode staring you out. When you hear that incredible soundtrack. And again, those transformations are to die for. Quite literally. Once transformed, each final form plays slightly different, and the only way you're going to beat the game is if you transform at the right time and stay transformed for as long as you need, basically until the final boss. Again, lots of trial and error is going to be had here, and thankfully the somewhat lackluster gameplay can be overlooked due to the game's style. Well, that was the case back in the day at least. Not so much in Japan, but definitely in America. You see, the game did well at pulling people in Japan due to the features mentioned before, but it didn't do well at keeping people involved. In America, it kinda did the same, but for whatever reason, perhaps due to the popular theming being very relatable to popular metal artists and pop culture for the time, it did a fair amount better. Good enough, in fact, to be released as a pack-in game for the new System 16 inspired video game console, the Genesis.
The technology that made home videos possible is called an N-bit system. Now SEGA has introduced Genesis, a revolutionary 16-bit system that improves gameplay opportunities, graphics, memory, and sound. This new technology made its nationwide debut in Manhattan with Donald Trump on hand as kids and parents challenged each other to SEGA's newest games, Tommy Lasorda's Baseball and Altered Beast.
I love it. I think it's great.
This is the best I've ever seen.
I like it. It's pretty cool.
The 16-bit microprocessor allows for enhanced graphics, more memory capability, stereo sound, depth perception, simulated 3D. You now have a game that is richly enhanced, a game that is very, very similar to that you would find in the arcade.
This conversion, although not arcade perfect, was in fact a great version of the game, and even though some reviewers, even for the time, were a little scathing with their reviews saying that the game didn't offer much to you, the player, what it did offer was an experience that no other game was able to do at the time. You see, alongside this packing game, players were able to pick up Last Battle, Space Harrier 2, Super Thunder Blade, Tommy Lasorda Baseball, and Thunder Force 2. And although Altered Beast was not the best of the bunch, it was definitely not the worst, but most importantly, it showed off the power of the system arguably more than any other of those games ever did. The Sega Genesis was coming in to take on the NES. I mean, remember, this was released a whole 2 years before the Super Nintendo, and one of its biggest selling points over the NES was its claim to bring the arcade experience home. And what better way to show it off than with this game? Because of all of this, Altered Beast has held its popularity and then some. Everyone, for better or worse, remembers this game, and Sega, with so many incredible titles that they could promote from their past, still decide to show off this alongside the top franchises that they are known for. And sure, that may sound a little bonkers to some, considering the Mega Drive is the most iconic system that Sega ever released. To me, it makes perfect sense.
When I heard that Altered Beast would be bundled with all the Sega Genesis packages in North America, I had no idea what to expect. I was working in Japan and heard about it there. I just said, that's terrific, I can't wait to see it. But we never saw the bundle in Japan. I had to go to the US about 3 years later, and I heard about it again. So I said, this time I'll definitely go to a store. But I couldn't find it anywhere. There was nothing but the Sonic the Hedgehog bundle available, so I was never able to see it. That's my only regret about the game.
Late in the 20th century, terminal boredom fell upon the land. The maker looked down and said, "This is not good." And so it was. He brought forth Genesis, a system with twice the power, twice the challenge, twice the fun, with high-definition graphics and stereo sound. And the maker saw what he had done and said, "Now that's not bad. Discover Genesis, and your world will never be the same."
That Mega Drive port, ladies and gentlemen, in all honesty, did what it needed to do. It looked fantastic for a home console port of a stunning arcade game, and in some cases it even improved upon that arcade game with parallax scrolling, and although I find it easier, probably because I played it more, the slight change in the enemy's placement was done to actually help harden, aka lengthen the game a tad, because this is quite simply a port through and through. No bells or whistles added to this one at all, which isn't surprising because it actually only came out a few months after the arcade original. Literally, that's quick. Even though he wasn't involved himself, besides giving some advice, he was tempted to try his best to actually get those pressure-sensitive features implemented into this version of the game, but he simply ran out of time. Plus, there was actually no easy way for the Mega Drive to pull that off so early on in its life. Shortly after this, another port was made. In fact, it was actually being made at the same time for the Master System. Just like most Mega Drive games that were downgraded to work on the 8-bit system, this one obviously wasn't as good. In fact, it's pretty terrible. The game seems to have taken the faults of the original and made them far, far worse. I mean, seriously guys, this game is so slow, and then some. And even with an entire missing level, it's actually a complete chore to play. The PC Engine port isn't too bad in all honesty. I mean, the difficulty level has been ramped up a fair bit, which will help keep the game fresh for hardcore fans. And if you're lucky enough to own the PC Engine CD version, you get this nice kind of animation sequence. The only problem is the way the game feels. There seems to be this weird kind of delay that honestly will take some getting used to. Strangely enough, Sega actually published Altered Beast for the Famicom too. Who knows why, and it too is not very good at all. To be fair, it does change up the gameplay somewhat, but again it's more frustrating than anything else. And regarding home computers guys, when I knew no better, I enjoyed loading up the game on my Amstrad, and although honestly I never actually remember getting past the first level, and now when I look back, meh. That's pretty much the case throughout. The Amstrad release, although nostalgic, is barely playable at all. The Atari port is probably the best from what I've tried, and to give it its due, it does feel completely playable compared to what you would expect. The Commodore 64 version looks okay, not great, but it's at least playable. The Spectrum version is technically impressive for the system, but you'd never actually want to play it because the controls are basically impossible, and the same goes for the MSX, as it's exactly the same from what I can tell. In other words, none of these are worth it. The only real competition is between the arcade original and the Mega Drive port. Well, there is the Tiger game too, but yeah. Shall we move on? Over the coming years, when Altered Beast fell into obscurity pretty quickly, not even being included in the Mega Games collections, I remember it just always sitting there in some gamer's collection, mostly by the older brother of a friend that got the system at launch that wouldn't even let us play it in the first place. Yep, as quick as it came, it was forgotten, as other brawlers flooded the market and classic ones including games that had come out before or around the original's release got sequels during the 16-bit era. Altered Beast got nothing. game. There was of course Matthew Sweet, a musician that liked the game so much that he not only owned the original arcade in his house, but also named an album after the game. I would say I will talk more about this next time, but that's kind of the whole story regarding that. Basically, the world was slowly forgetting about Zeus's resurrection and the fight against Neph. Well, that was until THQ got hold of the rights for a few games, and as you would expect with 3D6 games behind it, just like Revenge of Shinobi, they did a pretty shoddy job at rising the game from its grave. In all honesty, I mean, what did they actually have to take from? I tell you what, a crazy amount of charm and style, which this game doesn't have. Sorry to the devs on this one, but the levels are stupidly long and boring, the music is completely forgettable, and the design is this kind of digitized style that, in all honesty, made it dated as soon as it came out. The gameplay is kind of fine in all honesty, but at the same time it's as bare bones as you could possibly imagine. In my eyes, a true 2D sequel that does the name justice can still be made, and this is just not it. Leaving us with one final game to talk about, Altered Beast on the PlayStation 2. And boy, it's as forgettable as they come. The original team are back for this one, and it's sadly nothing like other SEGA 3D rebrandings for the system, again like Shinobi, because this game is not fun at all. The original team are back for this one, and it's sadly nothing like other SEGA 3D rebrandings for the system, again like Shinobi, because this game is not fun to play at all. Obviously trying to jump onto the Devil May Cry style of gameplay, which was new, fresh, and more importantly popular at the time, SEGA looked back through their classic catalogue and thought, Altered Beast? Yeah, that might work. But it didn't. Again, it's the same game by name, but not by style. You play as this guy, someone who awakes with no memory, and would you believe it, he's been experimented on. Time to fight. The game just makes you wish you was playing 50 other games that are similar, in every single instance, better. It has this fairly cool mechanic which requires you to constantly kill in order to stay transformed, and I suppose in the right instance it would work well, but in all honesty I don't really care too much. It was a sad way to go for the series, not even getting a release of the game in America, and is sadly reminiscent of a time when SEGA were at their very worst. One positive about this game's limited release, however, is that thankfully it didn't ruin its history. Entire sections of SEGA branded shops are focused on this game. It still gets ports, bloody good ones too, as found on the Mega Drive Mini, and probably even better than the original, the 3DS. Though for all of its ups and downs, as stated, Altered Beast is remembered and then some. It was never the best, but considering how much is still pushed into the face of gamers above other games, you would think it is. The classic synthesized voices, the settings, the fact that it was all just one big play at the end of the game, yes, that's how the original game ended, shows us a series that even SEGA themselves don't mind poking fun at. It's camp, it's silly, it's fun when you get used to it, and for many it showed us what the greatest system of all time was capable of, and even though it's not the best, it was the perfect first step to perfection. Hey there guys, thanks for checking out the video. I want to give a big special shout out to all of my Patreons, of course, but first let's give a big shout out to Daz from Did You Know Gaming. Yes, that channel we all know. yeah, well, he actually provided his voice for this episode, so many thanks to you. And whilst I sort out a few family things that I need to sort out in the background that I can't really talk about, I actually had someone actually help edit this as well, and that would be GetBant. So if you did notice a slight change up in the editing style in the earlier part of this video, well, that would be because of GetBant. He helped out with this video, and I think, you know, together we made quite an awesome video. So thank you very much to GetBant. His channel link will be in the description below, as well as Did You Know Gaming. But you guys all know who Did You Know Gaming is. Anyway, let's give a big special shout out to those Patreons who help me out every single month. With an extra big shout out going to Gary Pinkett, Mantis, That's Retro Video Gamer, Ryan Burford, Andrew Dalton, Ben Jackson, Jonathan Hayward, Kevin King, Christopher Turnbull, Phil Lowlins, Rovan Army, Ryan Holtz, Retro to Next Gen, Hawk89, Dina Robertson Dunn, Adam Lefty Taylor, Intrigued Gaming, Abby Morris, Tim Labonte, Asobi Quang DX, Tim Lunn, Pixels.Limited, aka Samuel Victor, Red the Beard, Conrad Constantine, Pretendo64, Creamy Elephant, Casey Garner, Blitz, Hedgie, Kinglink Reviews, Shadow Dial, Game Apologist, Chris Applin, Wobbles and Bean, The Wonder Ducks, Ye Old Hamburglar, Dan Petit, Mike H. Fell, Lucas Softail, Ronnie Method, SSWB, Solix Captor, Jeremy Rodriguez, Nick Pollard, Bram Perez, Marcus Kingimo Cut Tyndall, The Geeky Dad, Richard Carter, aka Fantastic Dizzy, Todd Paul Float G, and of course, Petty Mew. If you guys want to get your name shouted out, get your name shown, come see what I'm working on, access all of the exclusive rooms on my Discord, and plenty of other exclusive things that these patrons get, including the upcoming movie night for Halloween, then please click the link that you see on the screen. Don't forget to subscribe, give the video a thumbs up, a thumbs down, whatever you prefer, and to everybody sharing my stuff over on places like Reddit and on social media, it really does help the show more than you know. So a big thanks to you too. Anyway, this is DJ Slope signing out, and hopefully I'll see you all next time.